If you've ever played Terraria, then you may have come across a subclass of weapons called sentries. I don't blame you if you haven't though, as these weapons are kinda trash on their own, and are intended to be used alongside minions and whips as part of a summoner's arsenal. So how would a Terraria playthrough look if you were to only use these slow, stationary, and sometimes stupid sentries? The first challenge in this playthrough comes from the lack of weapons. There's only 17 sentry weapons in the game, with all but 5 of these coming from the Tavern Keep NPC. The Tavern Keep will only spawn after defeating the World Evil boss, which is the Eater of Worlds in my case. The only other option in pre-hard mode is the Houndius Shootius, dropped by Deerclops. This means in order to get my first weapon, I'm going to have to defeat either of these bosses. But how exactly do I plan to kill these bosses without using any weapons? Well, if you've seen my boss drops only challenge, then you'll have some idea of where this is going. After spending some time underground doing my best to hide from enemies, I emerged to the surface with extra health, some basic movement accessories and a full set of platinum armour. I decided to get some sleep before my big fight with King Slime, only to be rudely awoken by the goblin army. I hid in a hole like the coward I am while they burned above me, then when the smoke cleared I went in search of the goblin tinkerer. After combining some accessories and finding cactus armour isn't an effective weapon against the Eye of Cthulhu, I spawned King Slime and started leading him into the various lava pools that I had laid out. It doesn't take too long to deplete his health, but unfortunately I don't get the drop I wanted from his first treasure bag. After a few more kills I get the slimy saddle, allowing me to deal decent damage while doing my best Chris Pratt impression.
Mushroom Kingdom, here we come!
With the power of Italian plumbing, I take down the Eye of Cthulhu, granting me another way to deal damage to enemies through the Shield of Cthulhu. With these two methods of damage, I can now descend into the snow caves to farm for Flink's Fur. Then using this, craft the summon item for Deerclops. The start of the fight was a little messy, with me deciding whether to use the shield bonk, slime bounce, or a mix of both. Eventually I landed on an incredibly trivial way to take down Deerclops using the slimy saddle. If performed correctly, the only danger with this system is the shadow hands spawned by Deerclops, but with my relatively high defense I don't have to worry too much about these. While this method may keep me alive throughout the fight, it certainly isn't a quick one, taking around 14 minutes from start to end. As a result, I unlock yet another way to damage enemies without using weapons, this time the Bone Helm. Unfortunately I didn't get the Houndius Shootius to drop on the first attempt, and had to farm Deerclops a few times before eventually, after 7.5 hours and 3 bosses defeated, I obtained my first weapon. Unfortunately, said weapon was pretty bad, so I wasted no time in working towards an upgrade. I cleared some space in the underground corruption and spawned the Eater of Worlds. While the Houndius Shootius certainly helped, I definitely feel like the Bone Helm did most of the damage here, as it's able to pierce through multiple segments. With the Eater defeated, the Tavern Keep can now spawn anywhere in the world, although he decided to take quite some time before doing so. I take this time to upgrade to some obsidian armour for the extra summon damage, along with completing some fishing quests and getting started on a hell bridge. I then decided to take on Skeletron and died, so instead took on Queen Bee and she died. The honeycomb accessory is actually quite useful in this playthrough, giving a less static way of dealing damage than sentries. At this point it had been a couple hours since I defeated the Eater of Worlds, and I was running out of things to do, so started clearing out an area in the underground for a hard mode mob farm. Thankfully, not too long after this the Tavern Keep actually spawned, and after buying a couple of sentries from him I returned to the surface to face tier 1 of the Old One's army. The lightning aura sentries got me through the earlier waves, but for the later waves I switched to ballistas to help take down aerial enemies. By the time wave 5 and the Dark Mage arrived, I had my own army of sentries dealing out massive damage and quickly took it down. The Mage drops a Squire Shield, which was a change made in the Labour of Love update that massively helped sentries and the Summoner class in general. There is one other drop I want from this event though. After farming the event a few times, I got the War Table, which was also changed in Labour of Love to give an extra accessory slot when right clicked, similar to how the Bewitching Table works for summons. With these upgrades I can confidently take down Skeletron, although doing so doesn't really give me any upgrades, so I move straight on to the Wall of Flesh. On my first attempt, I ran out of space on my Hell Bridge, so spent some time extending it. Then on my second attempt, I ran out of space on my world, which is a little harder to extend. On my third attempt I got painfully close to winning, with the wall being on just 31 health. I was as focused as I could be on my fourth attempt, making sure I kept some distance from the wall and its attacks until it was moving way too fast to stay away from. Then with one final boop on the nose, the wall was defeated and hard mode began. The first thing I do once entering hard mode is head to the Aether biome so I can transform my warrior emblem into a summoner one. This has to be one of the best additions to the Labour of Love update, and saves so much time grinding the Wall of Flesh for just a chance of getting the right emblem. My next priority was obtaining the Queen Spider Staff, the only hard mode sentry available before defeating a mechanical boss. After treating the spider biome with the same care as an arachnophobic in Australia, I have enough spider fangs to craft the staff. I then went about all the regular things you do once entering hard mode: mining ores, crafting wings, fishing for potions, dying to Queen Slime 100 times. Then, just to change things up, I decided to die to Skeletron Prime instead. Since I don't need to be holding any weapon for my sentries to deal damage, I decided I'd farm for the Rod of Discord, which was fun for the first couple of hours, but by hour 3 the boredom really started to kick in. Eventually it dropped though, and on the bright side it made farming for the Ankh Shield almost enjoyable in comparison. Neither grind, however, could come anywhere near close to the tedium of waiting for a sandstorm. I spent days lying in bed, waking only to do the daily fishing quest or when the wind crept above 30 miles per hour. Unfortunately, this is the only way to get the Forbidden Armour set, which is the only real damage upgrade I could get over Obsidian at this stage. After waiting long enough, I decided to take down Queen Slime and was lucky enough to get the gelatinous pillion mount from the first bag. I returned to waiting for a sandstorm and eventually one came. I crafted the mask and robes, but the thought of waiting for another sandstorm filled me with dread, so I went straight into another attempt of Skeletron Prime. The additional defense granted from the armour and the extra mobility from the Rod of Discord seems to make a big difference, turning the tide in my favour. Playing with the spider staff is a very different experience to most other weapons. The spiders it spawns can only jump a few blocks high, so staying near the ground is important. On top of trying to dodge the boss's attacks, there's now the added complexity of trying to lead it into all the spiders so that I can actually deal damage. When I do this right, however, I do deal out a lot of damage, and after a few minutes, Skeletron Prime is defeated. With what was probably the most challenging part of this playthrough out of the way, I had now unlocked Tier 2 of the Old One's army. This meant I could also buy the ballista cane and 2 pieces of squire armour from the tavern keep to help me through the event itself. With my upgraded weapon and armour, I make quick work of the Old One's army, using the defender medals I won to complete my squire set. This power boost led to a bit of a boss rush through the rest of progression, and is the stage where sentries actually become a formidable subclass. The remaining 2 mechs were the next to fall, and with how tanky squire armour is, along with the damage of the ballista cane, it doesn't take long, allowing me to fight them back to back on the same night. Only after defeating them did I realise I still had my fishing accessories equipped. After spending some time expanding my jungle arena and looking for Plantera bulbs, I eventually find one and begin leading her back to my arena. Once here, the fight is fairly easy, just circling in phase 1 and then running away from the scary plant monster in phase 2.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
I made my way through the jungle temple to find an annoyingly small golem room. I decided to then make this even smaller in order to have a flat bottom to the arena, which ended up stopping golem from spawning and costing a power cell. I ended up dying on my first attempt, which is a little embarrassing against Golem, but on my second attempt I came out on top. Defeating Golem unlocks the final tier of the Old One's army, so I grab an upgraded ballista from the tavern keep and build a platform to help against Betsy. I lost on my first attempt, with the Terraria crystal taking too much damage, but then on my second I barely scraped by a win, giving me enough defender medals to upgrade to a full set of Valhalla Knight armour. Next comes the lunatic cultist, who at this point may as well be called a mini-boss. The pillars, on the other hand, are still the worst part of the game, even with the changes made in Labour of Love. I'm happy these changes were made, but I still feel a fundamental rework is necessary to make them an enjoyable section. With my final preparations complete, I take down the last pillar and wait for Moonlord to spawn. The first fight really did not go well. I was trying to keep relatively close to the Moonlord so that my sentries could deal damage, but fighting the boss this way is very difficult with the amount of projectiles he spawns. Instead, I opted to go for a more tanky build, combining the Charm of Myths, Frozen Shield, Star Veil, Worm Scarf, Shiny Stone and the Spore Sack to help deal with moon leeches. For mobility, I used the Gelatinous Pillion mount when necessary, although this was only really used to avoid the Death Ray attack. Once the eyes were down, the Moonlord began dealing increased damage, and it became a race to see which one of us could kill the other the quickest. After watching my health bar get lower and lower between each health potion, I eventually defeated Moonlord, proving that you can, in fact, complete Terraria using sentries only.